Classification and Compensation Study Commission presentation, January 25th, 2022. Good afternoon, Joe.
Okay, good afternoon, Commission. We're bringing you the results of our classification and compensation study that we've just completed. As you know, we contracted with a consultant to do a market study and a professional review of our classification structure. So they are here with us today. That's Logic Compensation Group. The plan for this work session is to go over the study, what was done, and the results, as well as the pay increases we're recommending. And then tonight's agenda item is approving the salary ordinance that came out of this study. So I'm going to bring up Lori Messer, and on the phone we have Annette Hafer with Logic Compensation Group. We've had a really good partnership with them, and I think we've gotten to a great place to implement pay increases that are going to have an immediate positive impact, as well as helping us through the future. So I will have Lori take us through the study.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you, Honorable Mayor and Council, for the opportunity. Today, I want to go over a high-level overview of basically what we did throughout the study, how we did it, what we found, and what we're recommending. So we'll start with the study objectives. At the onset of the study, when the city issued the RFP for this project, there were several objectives that were stated. The first was to ensure that like jobs are classified together, so jobs that are doing a similar type and level of work are grouped together, that pay items, which include salaries and incentives, are commensurate with the duties, competencies, and specific qualifications and certifications for the jobs. That there's a career path. Employees would be able to easily identify what is the career path within their job family, and not only in their job family, but across the organization as well. We also wanted to establish justifiable pay differentials between job classes. And basically what that means is if you're moving from a level 1 job to a level 2 job, there's sufficient distance between those pay grades so you don't have higher level employees making less than the ones. So you don't have the 2s making less than the 1s. And finally, to maintain a competitive position in the market with respect to the organizations that the city competes with for labor. And that included not only other public sector organizations, but it did also include some private sector as well. And we will go over those a little bit. I will show you in a few slides who those organizations were. So along with those objectives, we identified some key deliverables that we would provide to the city. First is to look at all of the job descriptions and apply a standard job evaluation methodology. Basically, what a job evaluation does is it creates the internal hierarchy of jobs from your most entry-level jobs all the way up to your city manager. The next deliverable was to create a custom survey and distribute that among the public and private sector organizations that the city competes with for talent. Once we got that information back, we would put together pay structures. We would recommend grade placement for all of the classifications. And finally, we would determine what would the cost be to the city to implement that. Okay. So first of all, I want to give you a high-level overview of the phases of the study as well as the timeline. This study was made up of 5 separate phases. The first was the study initiation, and I'm going to go into more detail. This is just very high level. We started this study back in May of 2021. After the study initiation, we got to understand the organization a little bit. Then we took a look at the jobs and did the internal equity review. Once we understood the jobs, then we were ready to go out to market and see if we could find like jobs in the market and what they paid. Then we developed the salary structure, and that puts us at where we are today, ready for implementation, or ready for the consideration of implementation and maintenance. Okay. So first, let's talk a little bit about the study initiation. Basically, this is where we come in. We were on site for 2 days. We met with a steering committee here at the city to determine what are some key factors? What is the city's overall compensation philosophy? How do they view pay and benefits, full package? Then we also met with all of the department directors to understand what are some of the issues that you encounter within your own department that create challenges for you or that are working really well for you and you don't want to tip the apple cart on. So as a result of all of this, we developed a total rewards philosophy in collaboration with the city. On this chart here, you can see there are 6 different elements of a total rewards philosophy. The most common that we mostly think of is compensation, base pay. The next item is comparator market, career development. Those are all things, as well as we did touch on some high-level benefits items, but those are things, those 4 things were within the scope of this study. There are 2 other components of a total rewards philosophy that were not part of the scope of the study, and that had to do with performance and recognition, as well as the overall work environment. Once we developed the roadmap for the study moving forward, then we were ready to get into understanding the different jobs here at the city and the different levels of work. So in order to do that, we took a look at all the job descriptions and applied a job evaluation methodology called logic leveling to each of the jobs. And like I said earlier, that helps us to build the internal hierarchy of jobs from the most entry to the most senior. And it takes into consideration items such as your organizational role, your level of responsibility, the complexity of the job, supervisory accountability, and any special licenses and certifications in education. The thing about job evaluation is that the methodology is applied consistently across all of the different jobs within the organization, so it's a non-biased approach to aligning jobs within the organization. Ultimately, the job evaluation results integrate with the market data that we collected, and that serves as the basis of employee pay. Okay. Once we understood the jobs, now we were ready to get into the compensation portion of the study. And the first thing that we needed to do is to define who is the comparator market for the city of Pittsburgh. And some basic criteria that we often use in making those determinations are cities that have a similar budget, similar population, similar number of employees, similar service offerings. Some other things that we take into consideration is the location or the proximity to the city. We also took a look at private sector organizations here in the city because they are competing for talent as well and employees have left or come from there. And basically the bottom line is, who are you competing with as an organization for the talent you need in order to offer the services to your citizens? Once we decided who is the market at a high level, then we drilled down to identify specific public sector and private sector organizations. This chart on the screen indicates all of the public and private sector organizations in which the survey was distributed to. Those highlighted in gray did not participate in the survey. Overall, we got a 77% survey participation rate, and honestly, that is like really, really good right now, considering everybody's workload, staff shortages. And the other amazing thing, and I give a lot of credit to the city for these partnerships and collaborating with the private sector, we normally don't see that level of participation from private sector organizations. So that was very astounding, and kudos to the city for helping make that happen. Now that we've decided who we're going to survey, the next is we need to develop a custom survey. And for the custom survey, we need to identify jobs that cover the entire organization, from the most entry-level jobs to the most senior-level jobs, as well as jobs across the different departments within the city. We limit the number of benchmark jobs that we survey because we have found in our many years of doing these surveys, anytime you get over the 50 benchmark jobs, your participation starts to decline. we actually had 74 jobs that were included in the salary survey, and we still got a 77% participation rate, so that was very good. Okay. Once we sent out the survey and we got people's survey responses back, we vetted the data. Any questionable data we followed up on. We did outlier analysis. We wanted to make sure that before we moved forward, that the data that we had was reliable in order to move forward in building the pay structure. And we did collaborate with the city throughout the whole process. It was a very good partnership back and forth, so that was good. So what did we find? When the city identified its pay strategy, it was determined that what the city wanted to be at the median of the market, which means right in the middle. So if there's 11 organizations, 5 are going to pay more, 5 are going to pay less, and you're right there in the middle, okay? When we looked at the general and the sworn management, the primary factor that we looked at was actual salaries being paid in the market. The reason we look at actual salaries being paid in the market is because that's really what you have to compete with in order to attract talent. It's not a salary range when it comes to those types of jobs. You might not get the level of experience that you want if you're just basing it on ranges. And particularly someone who has a lot of experience coming in the door. When it comes to the sworn police and the sworn fire, we look at those jobs a little bit differently because we call those career level jobs. It is not unusual for someone to start their career as a police officer or a firefighter and end their career as a police officer or firefighter because the next rank is supervisory. And in fire, aside from the engineer, fire engineer, there's supervisory ranks, and not everyone aspires to that. So because of that, we look at the range minimums and compare how do the city's range minimums differ from the market. So going back, let's continue with police and fire. We found that the minimums for police were lagging the market by 16.2%. We would call that, in our definitions, significantly misaligned with the market.
Could I ask?
Yes.
Did you compare the police and fire to other police and fire, or just,
Yes.
So that's what that was compared to?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. The sworn fire was lagging by 25.8%. One of the things, when we looked at the data, I know the sworn fire below the market, 25.8% is a little bit shocking, but it's our understanding that those people weren't being hired at the entry rate anyway. They were being hired within the range. Okay, so it makes that number not as real because, yeah, there was some false minimums in there. The general population was lagging the market by 10.2%, was just teetering on competitive. Anything between plus or minus 10% we call competitive. You probably want to be closer to the market than that, but it is aligned that way. So we looked, once we found out all of that, then we were ready to build salary structures utilizing the data that we collected. As a result, we ended up creating 3 different pay structures. There's a general structure, a sworn fire structure, and a sworn police structure. We did use the market data collected and melded that with the job evaluation results to come up with the proposed general salary structure. We grouped like positions and set ranges based on the market data. How were those jobs aligned in the internal hierarchy? The other thing that we did is currently the city has a different pay scale for exempt and a different one for non-exempt. We married those together, so it's just one pay scale for the general population. The other big thing that we did is we modified the range widths, and that's the distance from the range minimum to the range maximum, because what we found in the market is the market had narrower range widths than the city did. So the downside to that is your starting rates, when you move it from the midpoint, and you make it wider, great up here on the upper end on the maxes, but the problem is your minimums. They're significantly lower, and it makes it difficult to recruit. So we aligned that, and then with the sworn police and fire, we used their ranks to create the police and fire structures. And this is what the structures look like. In the general structure, and I know it's probably hard to see, but there are 13 different grade levels with minimums, midpoints, and maximums. And one of the things I mentioned earlier in the presentation was that we wanted to make sure there were justifiable differences between the levels. And you'll notice most of the midpoints are around 10% plus difference. So if you have an employee who's in grade 4 and promotes to a grade 5, there's sufficient differentials there. Or you have a person in 4 and 5, you don't have the 5 making less than the 4. Then police structure, P1 through P5, no different than it is today. We didn't do anything with the ranks or anything in police and fire, so that all remained constant. We just updated the ranges.
And I just want to point out here on the screen, it is different than that salary structure included in the report. This one's already been adjusted 1% with the COLA for 2022 as we normally would, so it's the same as what will be on the agenda item tonight.
And with regards to the 1% adjustment that the city had budgeted, what we're seeing across the country right now is much larger increases to salary structures given the current labor market and their demands. It's kind of forcing a little bit more. We're seeing more along the lines of 2 to 3%. We've seen some even go 5%. I think that some of that is pretty aggressive and maybe a knee-jerk reaction, but so it might be something that the city might want to consider during the next budget cycle.
On these grades, when you said if you would move from 4 to 5, and say you're mid-grade of 4, if you went to a 5, would you keep the same money even though it was higher than the minimum? Or would you have to go to the minimum of that pay grade?
I'm not sure what the policy is, but if you went to the minimum of the next pay grade, that would result in a pay decrease. And I don't believe, in my recollection, there's no pay decreases.
Okay.
It's a percentage increase, I believe.
There is overlap there, like from max to min, but typically a promotion up would result in going back down.
Since there seems to be a big disparity between, in the fire department, do the fire workers work more hours to make up the difference during the course of the year? Or do they work the same hours as the police department?
Fire's based on 56 working hours in a week, so that's why their hourly rate there would seem low. They work more hours per year to make up, so the annual would be more comparable.
Okay.
Okay, so the final part of the study is determining what market adjustments we could make based on the results. So to do that, we put together some strategic goals that we knew needed to be accomplished with the adjustments. The first being we just have the new salary structure made with the ranges. All employees should fall within that market-based competitive range. We knew we must be competitive in hard-to-fill positions that we had trouble receiving applicants for, that we have vacancies in. And then compression would have to be looked at. So compression happens when we raise the lower end of a range up. It compresses that wage against the people who are at where the new wage was just taken to. So a way to think about compression, if we have a position at $35,000 and now that grade, that minimum is now $35,000 and a new employee is going to come in and be at the same amount, that's just created compression there. So we knew that had to be mitigated as much as possible with the adjustments. Years in position needed to be looked at. Generally, a long tenured employee should not be at the same part of a range as a new hire with no experience.
Joe, is there a simple answer on what you arrived on in your final decision on that?
For
On to adjust for compression?
Yep, there's a couple adjustment rules that I'll show that sort of show how we address that compression through this. And then we wanted this consistently applied across departments. The same methodology applied across the city to every employee. So after a number of scenarios and adjustment methods were looked at by us in Logic, we've come up with one that meets all the goals. First is bringing everyone within that range. So salary below the new market-based ranges would be brought up to that minimum of the range. So that only affects those that have a salary underneath the range. Next, to address that compression, we need to move everyone forward in the range. And so there's two ways we do that, with a percentage increase or the time and position adjustment. So the percentage increases there are based on a position's grade and the position's current placement within a range. So a 1% increase is given to those above the midpoint of the range. So if your salary is already above the midpoint, already in a market competitive position, you're receiving a 1% adjustment.
And that's outside of the COLA.
And yeah, these are adjustments, and then we're gonna put the COLA on top of these adjustments.
Okay.
So I wanna differentiate between the percentages. A 1%, or the percentage increase is based on the mid number. So it's not a 1% of current wage, it's 1% of the mid number. That way, everyone in a grade is moving up proportionally, receiving the same percentage increase, rather than for their salary.
That makes sense. That's a big part of this. It's
Right.
not-
Okay. So that's 1% for above the range. If your salary is below the range in a less competitive position, they're receiving 2% of the mid. Grades 3, 4, and 5 are our first full-time positions in the structure. Those are where we're experiencing vacancies, we're experiencing the market increase wages quickly, and those are receiving a 5% of the mid increase. So then on the other end, grades 10 and above, that's starting at deputy directors, and moving up, would only receive a 1% of the mid increase, no matter where their salary falls within the range. So if
Okay.
they are already in a competitive or non-competitive, it's a 1% max.
And then they get the cost of living 1% on top of that.
And then, yeah, everyone's getting the increase from the compensation study, and then a 1% for 2022. New hires also fall within that 1% rule, and then time and position adjustments. This was really a tool to alleviate compression caused by other adjustments. How it was done is based on your years in a position, you should meet at least a target percentage of your range based on how many years you have. So that way, an employee with 10 years isn't gonna be left at the minimum. They're gonna meet at least target range, target percentage of the range after all this is done. And I have some examples, yep, sorry.
I have a question. Did you go through and look at each employee and individually?
Everyone was
see where
looked
they-
at citywide, every individual throughout department, to make sure it works
And the years they,
and it's fair, yes, yeah,
Okay.
the years of
All right.
service.
thank you.
Or years in position. So a few examples to run through. Here we've got employee A at 40,000 salary. We can see they're in grade 6, where the midpoint of that grade is 43,000, so they are under the mid. Their increase rule would be 2% of the mid increase. So that added to their salary is their adjusted salary, and then the 1% COLA increase on top of that brings them to 41,278.
Any questions on how that works, or?
Is it worth looking at what grade 6 was before, or?
So the grades have changed, let me just pull that back up. It would be difficult to set just 1 through, we had 16 or 17 before. And
Oh.
positions have moved between grades, so looking at grades side by side isn't a great comparison,
Okay.
because it's all
It's apples to oranges, yeah.
I think we had a couple of grades that only had one person in it. So the whole idea was to simplify the structure and get it down to compressed, so we can make a bigger impact on people and not have somebody hanging out in a range where they're kind of lost in our payroll. So that's what happens if you don't do this every 20 years, I think.
So I have another example to run through. Employee B at 25,000, we can see this employee's in grade 3 and below the minimum. So they would get that first adjustment up to fall within the range. So the bring to minimum increase is 1,000. And then grades 3, 4, and 5 are at the 5% of mid increase. So they aren't stacked on top of one another, the rules. It's the rule that's gonna benefit them the most is applied. So the bring to minimum increase is not applied, the 5% is. So that brings their adjusted salary up, that 1,561, and then the 1% COLA on top of that salary.
So in
Now,
a-
just for the benefit, for anyone watching or looking, this is not the total package. This is only the salary, correct? This does not include insurance and health care and all that.
Just wage, yes,
Just
does not
wage.
include
Okay.
the benefits on top.
So in applying the adjustments, if there are two adjustments that apply, you take the greater,
The one that benefits
that's
the
the
most.
most.
So when all of these are applied across the city, the average position increase is 5.2% of their wage. And then total personnel cost, the increase to the personnel budget, 559,335. And so that is the total number with benefits. That is not just wages. So that would be the total budget increase.
Okay.
And what would that 1% on, what's that cost that we budgeted for all employees?
Yeah, the 1% COLA would be budgeted every year.
It's like 300 for the general probably, and
How much is that?
300,000 for the general
300
fund,
on
and
top of-
then
yeah.
Do we base the COLA on federal, or do we base it on our own?
we kind of came up with usually we use the CPIU for the justification, but it's really programmed through the 5-year forecast. And quite frankly, it was based on what we thought we could afford as we lay it out against revenues. So it's not really tied to an index as much as it's tied to, if we don't do anything, we're gonna fall way behind, and apparently, if we only do 1%, we're still gonna be falling behind in the current market.
So when we break down that 559,000 by department share of where the increases are going, we can see it's proportional mostly with how many full-time employees are within each department. Police is the largest share. We knew that that was an area that would probably come back that needed a market adjustment for our patrol officers' starting salaries, and that was accomplished in this study. And then followed by public works and utilities, fire, and
If you had, and maybe you do, and I'm just gonna go police and fire. If you had a police officer or firefighter leave the city, do you do an exit interview and find out, is salary one of the main things they leave the city for? How do you know?
We do exit interviews with as many employees as we can. They're not required to do them, but we do them, and salary is something that we do here.
Because I know we have a lot of firefighters going to Olathe and Overland Park.
Yeah, we haven't had really as many firefighters leave recently
How
as
about
police officers.
Police leaving,
Yeah.
because, so maybe this might help keep them.
Yeah, I think for sure, one of the main reasons we did it was the market's changed so much, but to the extent that we could retain the people that we have, and it's a pay issue, we wanted to do everything we could. So, I mean, a great question. I do think, like Kim said, we don't lose a lot of police and firefighters, but I think of the ones that we do lose, they tend to be staying in the field. They're just going somewhere else, and they're obviously going to be going somewhere else, usually for a bigger market and more money.
And more movement? Do they,
We don't get that far into it, but
Okay.
I think, the chiefs are pretty clear on making sure, you know, why they're losing people, and if there's a chance we can keep them. And it definitely, you know, there's just some big cities that are attractive that are within an hour or two of here that can't really compete with what they're paying, but we definitely need to be doing what we can to keep them.
The really nice thing of this is obviously, you know, getting people compensated fairly, but also long-term down the road is when you look at retirement. You know, anytime you can increase your base, that's gonna be beneficial to all employees, no matter what department you're in, correct? I mean, so
Absolutely.
that's something that, you know, you don't really see, but it definitely has an impact, you know, and it's not, I've said this before, it's not something you think about when you're 21, but when you're 41 or 51, that becomes to be, you start looking back and you think, wow, that raise back in 2022 was the start of, you know, of helping with your base. So I had another question. I'll come back to it. It slips my mind right now. So.
So when we look at this same number breakdown by fund on where the increases would be fund-wise, most of it's in the general fund, which is where our police and fire and parks and rec are at. 75% of our employees are really in general fund. It's an amount we're comfortable with absorbing. We've had a strong economy and strong tax revenues that have put us in a position where we think we can afford this with the general fund.
I know what it was, Joe, and I don't know if it's to either one of you. Going forward, if this gets approved, have you given any thought or consideration? How do we keep this from getting out of whack so we're not, like you said, 20%, Darren? I mean, 20 years down the road, we're not looking at readjusting this all along. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it takes.
We do. Can I just jump to that, talk
And
about
if
that?
you
We
had
have-
it later
yeah.
on, don't
Yeah,
worry
in
about it.
just like 2 slides, we have some administrative recommendations for the city to cover just that, exactly. Yeah, maintaining the compensation system. One of the first things that we recommend organizations do is on an annual basis, adjust your salary structures to align with what's going on in the market. That will keep your structures will maintain pace with the market. And you can do it using a variety of factors. We have a couple of professional organizations who do a survey every year asking organizations, how much are you moving your salary ranges and what is your merit increase budget for the upcoming year? Another measure is CPI. And the third measure would be to go out and do a quick ad hoc survey of the organizations that we surveyed in this particular study to find out what are they doing. So that's step one. That should be done on an annual basis. Then the next step is about every 3 years or so to go out and do another custom survey to that same comparator group, or maybe the labor market has changed and it needs to be adjusted. But really that, going back out to survey, is like the litmus test. Did we keep pace with the market? Has there been a change in supply and demand of a particular labor skill set, and do any adjustments need to be made? When you do that annual adjustment, when you go out to do that 3-year adjustment, the goal is, it's very rare that you're going to see an implementation cost like you're seeing today when the study hasn't been done for some time. So.
I have something, I've read the ordinance a number of times. Something that could throw things out of kilter is this, let me read this line to you. The city manager is further empowered to allow salary incentive payments in addition to the base salary amounts contained herein. Now, couldn't that possibly throw things out of kilter? I mean, if you give somebody, like the city manager says, you've done a great job, I want to give you $1,000 increase in salary, and it takes somebody out of range from where they were in comparison to the other people. What do you do with that?
Do you want to address that, Darren? I don't think it was actually that type of an incentive. I believe it was more associated with pay practices and special certifications or licensures that are above and beyond what's minimally required for the job.
Yeah, the Logic came back and told us a distinction that we've never really made was base pay and incentive pay. And what's happened in the past is somebody in whatever department, the department directors have different kinds of incentive pay based on police and fire and utilities and things like that. But what happens is if you give somebody an incentive pay to do a certain job, maybe for a few years, in a lot of instances, when that job ended and somebody else took over those duties, that incentive pay wasn't removed. And in addition to that, what compounded the gap was the annual increase that the commission would authorize through the budget process would be applied to the entire salary, not only the base. So if you start getting a 3.5% raise on your incentive, then that's where it was brought to our attention that that's really getting things out of whack.
Well, that's what I'm afraid is gonna happen.
Yeah.
You know, if-
So we're gonna start, when people receive increases, they'll receive it on the base pay, not the incentive piece of that. The incentive is an addition. If they keep doing that job duty, they'll get it every year, but they won't have the increase put
Well,
towards
let's
it.
say, for instance, an example would be a firefighter two who goes out and gets a paramedic's certification. And you wanna incentive, I mean, he spent a year learning to do this kind of stuff. What do you do with a guy like that?
Well, in the past, I think they were incentivized, they were paid to receive that. Now, what we're hoping to do is, one of the structures we've set up is for all the jobs, regardless of department, your incentives should be more tied to you promoting up through the ranks through a formal job, rather than you happen to be in this job and you went out and got this and that and this, and it equals an incentive pay. So I think that's the easiest way for us to adjust things so we don't get into that situation.
So instead of randomly saying, okay, you received this certification, whatever it is, in the past, you would have gotten $500 or $1,000 on your base pay for whatever. Are we going to now look at the range and slide that person over in the range? If they do that, would that keep it more in line if you got the range, the line item in there? Is that something that you would do to promote someone or to?
I'm not sure I understood
I
that
think
one.
it's mostly a step to the next grade, the next promotion up.
Okay.
Get the incentives, get the certifications, now we've got it leveled so you can jump up to a new position rather than get $1,000 more.
Okay.
But, you know, in the past, this, like Doc brought up, the incentive-based pay was for employees to get a little bit more money. So they did all this and they got incentive-based pay. And now you're saying you want to do away with that and go to a step-up promotion. Am I understanding that correct?
I think there's both. Aren't there both scenarios, depending on what
Yeah,
they're,
we're definitely not recommending a step
No.
system.
Well, what I'm getting at is, a lot of employees are going to do some incentive-based pay. Do they want to be a supervisor? Probably not. You know, maybe not, maybe some do, but that gives them a chance. They know that if we do this, we can get paid for it. And I hope we don't do away with that, because not everybody wants to go to the next level, whatever that might be.
I think one of the issues is when it comes to incentive pay, and we talked about this issue, is some organizations will give incentive pay for licenses or certifications that are required for the job. We don't recommend that. It's already built into the market data. You can't even be in the job if you don't have that certification or license. However, if you are a maintenance worker today and you get your CDL, so now your level of responsibilities can increase because you can drive those heavy trucks and stuff. One of two things can happen. You could have, what is the value of that to the town? So what should that be? Because it's in an area where the employee would actually use it in what they're doing. The person is also positioned to be promoted, depending on what that looks like for the city. A lot of those things are policy issues that, how does the city want to handle them? Is there a dollar amount for certain certifications? And to keep it under control, it's not like, oh, I'm gonna go out and get whatever certification I wanna get for me, and then the city should pay for it. There should be some sort of structure around
I
that.
agree with that. It should be job-related, whatever they're
Yes.
doing. But here's another question. So you have an opening, and say you hire somebody that has the CDL, that has this license, that has whatever. Are their salary's gonna reflect what they already have when they become an employee? or will they be put at the minimum?
For a new employee,
Do what?
like a new employee?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's where the range comes in. We don't have to hire everybody at the minimum.
Right.
We'll hire people based on their qualifications. If we have somebody that's got 10 years doing that job in a city that we're familiar with, they're obviously not gonna start at the minimum. Yeah,
Yeah.
good question.
I think another thing to note is that we're working together as a team for accountability purposes. So we have this range, and that a department head wants to hire somebody, they suggest what the dollar amount is, but then they'll go through HR and finance and then to the city manager before it gets completely approved. So nobody will be able to go over that maximum number in their pay range.
And the other thing is, when somebody, let's say someone now has met, I'll go back to the, not the CME, but the trainee, say they've trained to be something, or they've done a good job, and they want to, and their supervisor wants to recommend that they be considered for a step increase or more pay. Does that go from him or her to their superintendent, who then takes it up to the city manager? So we've got a trail to follow all the way up. It just doesn't happen at
Yes.
the top or the bottom.
Right, and that's one of the things that you've seen that we've had to try to clean up over the years, is having a central way. I mean, the department heads are pretty much tasked to manage their departments, but pay is a citywide issue because it affects the budget, and it's very much a talking point among water coolers, and we all know what everybody makes, and so we need to be more consistent, and yes, that's exactly where, it's always been set up like that, but a lot of times, the awkwardness comes sometimes if a department head will hire somebody and offer them money that hasn't been approved by finance and HR and the city manager, and then you're stuck with, well, if you bring in so-and-so at that level, you're gonna create 5 other issues for somebody either below it or above it, and that's what we have just strategically cleaned up, and we need to avoid creating again.
So who makes the offer? I mean, does HR call and make the final salary offer, wage offer, or did the supervisors?
So actually, it could be either way, but they will not make the offer until after we've met we have a team that meets on Mondays with the city manager, HR, and finance. So we go over all the PAFs and all the potential job offers. And then we'll let the supervisor, department head know, if you want to call and make the offer, you can, now that it's been approved by everybody, or we can make it. So, and then a written letter will go out.
So it's in the supervisor's best interest not to commit to a wage.
Not to make an offer until after our meeting.
so has that happened in the past? I mean, that doesn't seem like that's the way it should be. I mean,
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's, yeah. That's
I
why
mean,
we're
a
sitting here.
supervisor could have her friend
I
say,
think
hey,
it's
you got the
happened.
job and you're gonna make this, that's.
Well, I've got enough faith in the department heads that it's never been done like that.
Right.
But it has been done to the point that they're creating a problem by not reviewing the positions above and below it. And they're trying to just do the right thing, and the person looks like they're worth that. But it's like, well, if you're gonna, alienate 4 other people by hiring in at that level, you need to give some more thought to what's practical. Because quite frankly, we just can't afford to pay whatever everybody wants to work here. We have to pay what we can afford and what's commensurate with the rest of the group. So this is a good question, but we're giving it a lot more attention now.
I have a question. Like, follow up on Stu. Can you go sideways on the range instead of up? Can you slide all the way to the right for, say, years of service, that type of thing? Or are you always gonna stay in the middle?
Things that would take you through are the cost of living adjustment, or every other year we've been doing a 3% merit increase. So those would slide you throughout the range.
Slide you through, so you would slide right then?
Yeah, there would be
Instead
a
of
way to
stepping up?
Yeah, slide,
You
go
can
through
move
the
to,
range.
you can
toward
move
the-
to the top of a range
Yeah,
without going into the next
but do you
range.
find that people wanna just stay sliding to the right? Or,
If they wanted
like
to
he
stay
was
in the same
saying, they don't
position.
wanna step up to that next position where there's more responsibility type thing, they're just like doing their thing and
Well, yeah.
they're hanging right here and they
We've
wanna go
seen
this
that.
way a little bit.
We've had a recent police officer retire with 30 years and just was happy as a police officer too, and
Yeah.
great person, and didn't want the headache or whatever comes with anything above that.
Okay.
We
So-
never,
I didn't know if you saw that very often, so that's
So
why. I
you're
was-
the service in the position. I don't
Well, like
know.
he was talking about the firemen.
Yeah, if you're there
or the
five, I
police
don't know if
officer.
there's broke down, if you're here 5 years, 10 years, you're gonna get a little bit more money, but I don't know if that's what you're talking about, going across.
No, I was just following what Stu was saying, if they were, you know, staying in the middle or if they were ever sliding right on that range.
One
Is
of the
that-
other things that we did in developing the pay structure is, you talk about movement from one job to another and with more responsibility, but if I'm only gonna get paid 25 cents more an hour, it's not
Sure.
worth it.
Yeah.
But if there is a justifiable difference to say, wow, I could really make that, that could encourage some people who at one point said, it's not enough money for me to deal with that, to maybe change their mind.
Well, that can be said on exempt and non-exempt. Sometimes a non-exempt can make a lot of money on overtime and exempt people don't get that. So, maybe, why would you want to be a supervisor if you can make just about as much on overtime, so.
So, creating a wider gap between the steps, is that part of the objective to create career ladders?
That
Or is
was
that
to
separate?
create justifiable differences in pay levels. Because one of the issues when they're really close together, and you've got, a job family that's like grade 4, 5, 6, and then maybe 8, there's issues there when those 3 grade levels that are together, the jobs that are in those 3 grade levels together, it can get kind of sticky where lower level jobs are making more than, because there might only be like a 2.5% difference in the ranges, and it's just not sufficient.
So in your experience, how, do you see ways that businesses can leverage their fringe when they're recruiting and recruiting?
Yeah, that is an interesting thing. That is a really hot topic in the public sector right now. Public sector has traditionally been very rigid, and the workforce that is coming in today likes a lot more flexibility. And the private sector is much better at providing for flexibility than the public sector. So we are starting to see a shift to more of those work-life balance types of issues. I think another contributing factor, not only the generational thing, but
Just
COVID.
pointing at you, Joe. No, just kidding.
Oh, was I pointing at you? Sorry. Everybody except Joe. It's also the COVID thing. When people were at home, they liked it, and we're seeing a big shift in the, how many people are going back to work, or if they are going back to work, the type of work that they're willing to do. So there is a really big focus right now on some of those non-tangible, what are you gonna do for my professional development? What kind of time off do I get? Is there any flexibility in my work hours? And we know as a public service organization, there are some jobs that just are not flexible like that. A police officer cannot work at home, nor can a firefighter, right? It doesn't work like that. So, there's some areas that may be conducive to it. There are some that may not. But then there's also the overall organizational goal of, can some people do, but other people can't? So there's a lot going on in that space right now. That was a good question.
This is Annette. I'm on the phone. There's another thing that public sector entities can do to show value of the benefits, and that is total compensation statements, where you not only set out, hey, this is your base pay, but on the basis of what you're being paid, this is the value or the cash value of those benefits. And a lot of organizations have used those not only to let current employees know what the value of their total compensation package is, but also it might be a way to entice new hires into the organization if you can show them the value of those benefits that aren't necessarily cash value upfront.
Good point.
And Annette, I'm glad you brought that up. So if this were to be implemented, it would be reflected on the next pay date, February 4th. And with that, we would have a letter to each employee saying the adjustment, what their new salary would be, and then that total benefits, total reward statement saying, here's the salary, but also, you know, what the city contributes to your healthcare and the other benefit costs.
Have we done that before?
Individual, I mean, I know we've,
But not as an
I don't
organization?
think we've ever presented a letter to every employee. And I think that was, Cheryl's recommended to me 2 months ago. She was like, you know, please make sure whatever you guys recommend, if we adopt it, that you go back to every employee and say, hey, here's what happened to
Yeah,
you.
so they know.
So,
yeah.
and we're
So
following up
are
on
you
that.
gonna-
Right, but the total fringe too.
But
You're
I don't know
adding-
that we've ever added, I don't recall we ever saying, hey, by the way,
I think that's a good
I do too.
practice.
Does the letter come with their first paycheck, or is it separate?
Would be this week.
Oh, this
we
week.
Get letters
it'll be
out
before, yeah.
before the paycheck.
Assuming you approve the ordinance that's in front of you during the business session, we'll get it done this week and get them out.
You'd think.
I said it soon. I didn't have my hands clasped.
Something else along this line, and I think, was it public utilities? It looked like they have some kind of process. If you start out at entry level and you go across, and it seems like there's years of service on top of that. After you've been here 3 years, you might be, I don't know, dump truck driver or whatever. So, you know, will the employees, and did every department have this kind of breakdown that we're going to try to get people across the grade? And maybe if that is the case, the employees ought to be, in that department, should be explained, this is the steps that we've set up. You know, if they're available if you want to take part in them. So will they know
Yeah.
their steps, or?
We specifically drilled this thing down to the department head level and gave every department head a chance to not only discuss what the pay situation was, but literally lay out the promotional trail through the department, including, you know, some departments added an apprentice position, which we'd never had before. So, yeah, we definitely challenged the department heads to do that. I think across the board, they did in fact do that. And that will be a discussion, this discussion with the department personnel will be happening at the department head level and down. We will have HR and finance there for support, but the department heads are responsible for getting back to all of their people and explaining not only the pay adjustments, but what else has changed in their.
I have one other thing, I'm just looking here, on determined implementation cost. Going back to what we said before, LCG recommends that moving forward, supplemental pay for certification, licenses, and assignment incentives be paid separately from base pay. And that's what your recommendation, that's what we're gonna do, right?
So that's breaking out a base salary versus what the amount of the incentive is. So no pay is gonna go away, they're just separated, so we know what the base is, know what the incentive is.
And the annual increases that they receive will be on the base, and the
Okay.
incentives will just be incentive. And if that incentive happens to go away, we'll make sure that we actually go back and remove that from their pay, which sometimes.
Just so it's clear for the employees to understand what's happening.
Yeah, yep.
So the different pay grades, I don't know if this is what you were talking about, Chuck?
What's that now?
I don't know if this is what you were
I
talking.
can't read it, I had to put it on a laptop.
I know, but it basically describes what the responsibilities,
Right,
et cetera,
right,
are.
and if you're here this long and, you know, if you.
Yeah,
That is what we call logic leveling. That's the job evaluation tool that we use that helps to define what level is a particular job. And I think it's important to remember too, it's the job, not the individual.
Right.
Right? So that's all about jobs, yeah.
You usually present that to like people that are 25 or under with really good eyes.
yeah.
Yeah,
Can I have a reader?
not me.
If you can read it, you get a raise.
Yeah.
Usually they're often on legal size paper, but it wasn't conducive to the report.
On your recommendation, in terms of moving forward and going back and surveying our database, is part of what you're providing for us that tool so that we can use that in the future?
You know, it is the easiest way to do it. We don't really have a tool for it. I mean, we could set an Excel spreadsheet up for you, but most of our clients who do that, when they want to compare against a specific targeted group of organizations, send out an email and people give you two numbers back, their range adjustment percentage and their merit increase number, and you just fill them in and what's the average, the median, and go from there.
Okay.
But we'd be happy as part of the training after everything is done to provide that to the city.
Are we out of slides?
Yeah, that was the last one. We skipped a few, but it got us there.
So, not to mix things up, but, you know, some communities are taking, their, recovery money and doing like one-time bonuses, for the 2 years of COVID that everyone has gone through. I did ask Darren to look at that. What would that look like if we did that also? I know that, you know, we don't want to give the impression that we're using that money to fund wage increases. But, given the fact that we're going into year 3 of COVID, and if we have the capacity, maybe this would be a time to also, since there's gonna be a lot of maneuvering on the payroll part, to consider that. I don't know what,
As a,
one-time
Extra.
bonus, yeah, one-time
we
bonus.
talked about that, didn't we?
Yeah, I mean, I did what any good city manager would do, and I deferred to finance because they charge the money. So, Larissa has assured me that, you know, we could consider that. I mean, it would be up to the 5 of you, what you think would be appropriate. The money's there. It's been done in other Kansas communities where they've just deemed, what do they call the personnel, not emergency? Essential workers. And so under that essential workers category, I think what I was specifically asked was could we do 1,000 for full-timers and 500 for part-timers? And Larissa said, well, she said yes.
Larissa said yes.
Now, that would be a one-time deal.
That would be a one-time deal, and in my opinion, it should be across the board, top to bottom, because everybody was involved in keeping our city open last 2 years.
But that's not part of this.
No.
No,
No,
that's-
separate.
no.
You're
And I
talking about on
hesitate-
top of this.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
hesitate to bring it up tonight because it might get, confused.
Isn't that what the school board did?
Yeah, yes.
Yeah, that's it's been a common practice. I think the rules on how you could use that money were a lot stricter. Now that they've come out with this new general rule, you can actually use that money for roads and things. But for us, I don't think there's anything more essential than our employees, and I think it'd be a really nice gesture by the 5 of you if you wanted to do that, but I would.
Larissa, would it be better to put that off for a meeting or two? Or address it
is-
now?
What would you have to do?
Is the effort, is it better to have all of this effort in one payroll, or?
I mean, we're planning on if approved tonight, have all the adjustments in tomorrow. If payroll will start next Monday, so I mean, we would have time to enter that too.
But it's not time critical like the raises
Right,
are.
right,
No.
We could implement it in a month and just say, I mean, either way, whatever day it lands on, it would be the same amount of money to everybody.
So I guess I just wanted us to consider it at whatever point it's appropriate.
You know, at the school, I mean, what we got is, I don't know, it was like in increments, like you got, say, $500. You could get a total of maybe, and I'm just throwing this out here, it was like 3 increments. You could get a total of maybe $1,500. But if you got 500 and you stayed there another year, then next year you would get that extra 500.
That was out of the rescue money?
Huh?
That was
Yeah,
out of the
yeah,
rescue
the-
money?
The COVID, it was
Oh, wow.
something from COVID. I think it worked out with the school
Yeah.
teachers, and then we got the same thing. but,
Well, we don't have an endless amount, so,
Yeah.
keep
So
that
it can
in
be
mind.
one-time thing, or you can
One-
break it down
But if,
over.
yeah, I
I
mean,
would think
One
one and
time.
done, yeah.
Okay,
But whenever it would be.
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say that this is Annette. You know, back when Lori and I started in this business, 25 years or so ago, bonuses were kind of a bad word in the public sector, but I would say in the last 10 years, we've seen a lot more organizations use bonuses for particular incentives. For instance, exceptional contribution, work that goes way above and beyond the call of duty, recruitment bonuses, retention bonuses, especially those 2 things, we're seeing a lot more organizations consider and put in place those things because they need to get and retain this staff in order to provide those essential services.
and like you said, Don, during COVID, I think that's We had to have the people here, and
Yep.
they ought to be rewarded for staying with us. you
And
know.
in my opinion, our community did excellent.
Right.
Our city, our schools, everybody, so.
Are you guys shaking your heads like you want us to do this, or are you thinking about it?
I'm with her.
I don't think we need a vote, but I think,
Well, will
I
we-
support it, I'm just trying to figure out if, when the best time to do it is, so if you, that's, if we
So
decide
maybe,
that.
in open meeting, we vote for it, but we defer to,
Why don't we come back and say
why don't we bring it back to you?
2 to 4 weeks, and that way you'll have better numbers for us and stuff like that.
If you
Better
can-
numbers of
If we can
what?
just say
Yeah.
the first meeting in March, I'll come back to you with the final numbers.
Okay.
And if you want to do it at that point,
Final numbers as in the total?
as in what it would cost.
Oh, yeah.
What it's
I
gonna
mean,
cost.
I don't know,
What do we want to?
1,000 for full-time, 500 for
I mean, that's gonna
part-time.
be 300,000.
But we've got vacancies, so I think,
It's
I think
like 270.
we'll come back,
something.
yeah. I mean, we don't have to wait. You can just authorize us to do it, and we'll do it when it's convenient in the next couple of weeks, if that's okay. But Ron, however you guys want to handle it.
So is it something we have to vote on?
But we can use it for roads too?
Yeah, you can use it for wastewater treatment plants, you can use it for.
so we would need to vote in open meeting.
Yeah,
I'd prefer it if we just
Yeah.
came to you with the formal recommendation, and you guys could just vote it in.
So I would prefer that maybe the second meeting of February as opposed to waiting till March.
Okay. Make it happen.
What is,
You want to close this out with what's coming, and
Yeah, no action is needed with this, but tonight it'll be approving the salary ordinance that would allow us to implement these increases, so.
And Lori's traveled here, and she is flying out tomorrow at 5 AM out of Kansas City, so she's gonna be going back to Kansas City tonight. Do you want her to stay or do you have any question? I'd kinda like to cut her loose if you don't think
Yeah,
there's gonna be a
I
big
mean,
discussion during
I
the
would think if we have
actual-
any questions, we'd probably handle it right
Yeah.
here.
I do have one more question. I see at the end of this, if it's approved, then we do follow-up meetings with the city, scheduled for 3, 6, and 9 months and 12 months. So then, at some point, is it that you meet with the commission, or you meet with Darren, and Darren tells us how it's going after?
Typically, we meet with HR and we say, hey, how's it going? Is it working for you? Have there been any unintended consequences that we didn't think of, we didn't resonate as we were doing this that we can help you with? So we just want to make sure that we don't we're done. We want to make
Work in
sure throughout
progress.
the year that we're helping you to maintain the system.
So then they will let us know, HR would let us know after a year, whenever these meetings are, how's it going?
Yeah.
We'd like to get back and, on our side of it, get back and look at the hiring and see if the salary adjustments have really helped us with our vacancy rate, which is kind of maybe one of the two main drivers, other than retention, for doing this. So I think that's gonna happen probably in 6 months, so we'll definitely report back to you on how we're doing.
Well, having been through one of these in past lives, I just know how much work it is on the consultant side and then the staff. I just really, want to thank you, because going through every individual job must have been a nightmare.
Herculean.
And, Kim, you just learned a whole bunch in a short period of time. You know every job now. So thank you, everyone. This is really great.
Yeah, I always get you trump me a little bit, but that's good. You can't go undertake something like this without the horses to pull it off. And Kim wasn't even our HR director when we started, which is kind of funny in of itself, because what she was asked to do. But I think in the meantime, we hired Katie. Joe, this is probably one of the most significant projects he's worked on. Larissa's not new to the job, but I think the entire organization is so much more informed right now about what pay means, what it should mean, how we can manage it, versus kind of just willy-nilly all of us coming on one year after another, and what are we stuck with. But the amount of effort that went into this, I mean, I'd be embarrassed, honestly, probably to tell you how much time it took us sitting around the table over the holidays, driving Annette and Laura crazy because they were on the phone thinking, what is wrong with these people? I haven't talked to them in 3 weeks, and just really looking around the table with the department heads saying, we have to solve this. We can't go back to the commission and say, we didn't figure it out, we don't know what we're doing, let's just do a 5% across the board and call it good. I was just so impressed with everybody, and I think we have an executive team that's just outstanding. And if there was anything that's bugging me, it's that they made the early decision that they were only gonna take 1%, because if they would have taken any more, it would look like so much of the money was spent on the top of the organization versus what we were trying to do, which is increase those entry-level positions, so the people that were in the middle of our organization doing the work weren't thinking of quitting because they were doing their job and the job of 3 vacant people under them. And that was a conscious effort by the department heads to say, I mean, who doesn't want 3% if they can have it over 1%? But they made that decision, and then they came in every day and we cranked through this, and we're in a lot better place for it, and we're a lot smarter. And you're looking at the folks, some of them aren't in this room today, but I've never seen them dig in like this and knock something out, and I think it's a good product. So thanks for letting us do it, and thanks to all of them for doing it.
Well, I'd just like to say, we have lost employees because of wages. And, I think back that when that happens, you lose experience. And that's something that everybody needs in the workforce is experienced workers. And, you can replace them if you can find somebody that don't want to work. And you know how hard that is, trying to get people to go to work. So it takes a while for them entry level to get to the position of the experienced worker that we might be losing because of wages. And hopefully, this helps us retain, and I put a high value on that experience because we need that, so.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you so
Thank you.
much.
Safe travels for you.